Hey everyone, Rodney here, director and showrunner for FilAm Creative Voices. We have a very special episode of Voices for you. We got invited by Long Beach Comic-Con to hold a panel about Fil-Ams in comics, TV, and film. Walter and Arlyn were joined by two-time Emmy winner VFX artist Mark AJ Nazal and director of comic book-inspired films Lumpia and Lumpia 2, Patricio Ginelsa. This episode is audio only as the con didn't allow for video recording, but we had a ton of fun hanging at the con, and we hope you enjoy the talk.
All right, Filipino time, guys. We're ready to start. My name is Arlyn de la Peña. I'm one of the hosts for FilAm Creative Voices podcast.
And I'm Walter Talents, the other host for FilAm Creatives podcast. Thank you. Thank you for coming here, guys. First, we just want to say we're excited to be here. FilAm Creative, first of all, is a Filipino-American organization. You don't have to be Filipino to be part of it, but we're just a bunch of creative folks from, we have artists, actors from all the creative industry coming together. It's like an incubator to create, produce content from people of color in entertainment and arts. So hopefully you guys can check out our website, Instagram, and Twitter. That being said, I'm sorry. Oh, it's FilAmCreative.com. Sorry. Yeah, no. Fair question. And I just want to let you guys know, first of all, Bobby Pontilla, he couldn't make it here today. So, but we are joined by two other amazing panelists. We have Mark AJ Nazal, Emmy-winning visual effects artist. So please give him a round of applause.
And we have Patricio Ginelsa, who is a filmmaker, has been in the industry for quite a while. He's done the Black Eyed Peas music videos, other artists, Legacy, Bamboo, and he also directed feature films such as Lumpia and Lumpia with a Vengeance.
I think you should tell people what a lumpia is for the people that
y'all know what lumpia is? Y'all know? You guys know? Yeah, I'm looking at you. You know? Do you guys know what lumpia is?
Didn't you say there? Didn't you say it's a Filipino taquito?
It's like a Filipino egg roll, and so there's
Filipino
meat
spring
and
roll,
spring roll.
There's been a controversy
it's fried.
online.
It's really yummy.
Well, yeah, they have fried and they have it fresh. Hold on, it's gonna become a food panel. All right, so. And again, welcome everyone to the FilAm Creatives and Fil-Ams in comics, animation, and film. So we'll just start off the panel, and I just want to ask the panelists, how did you guys get into entertainment? Like, what made you want to do it, and did comic books play an influence or an influencing factor in that?
I mean, comic books are totally responsible for my my geekness, I guess. But really, what got me into filmmaking was really my dad's camcorder. I came from Daly City, and basically I just took my dad's camcorder and I just basically shot with my neighbors. We were all kids, and we made these summer home video movies called Kid Heroes. We'd make it every summer, and back then it was on VHS, and then we would share it during high school. Next thing you know, everyone would start sharing this VHS tape. They would say, "Oh, I want to be part of it." And the following summer, we would make the sequel called Kid Heroes 2. The next thing you know, the movies would get bigger each time because this thing would go viral as a VHS tape, and then more people from the neighborhood want to join in.
That's pretty fun.
And imagine these kids now. We were like, 10, 9? I was 12 at the time. Now we are reuniting for this crazy movie, Lumpia with a Vengeance. So it's kind of crazy to make a feature film with my friends who are much older now. And I think that's why Lumpia itself kind of represents my geekiness of comic books, my love for my community, but also sharing it with my own community, my neighbors. And it's a mixture, right? Because you have Danny Trejo in it. It's a lot of professional actors and crew members, plus my friends who aren't necessarily actors in this movie. So that's kind of like, comic books are nerdiness and us being geeks. We just enjoy each other's company, and we're all on the same page.
I think for me, like, comic books in particular are probably the main reason I'm in this industry. I mean, I remember it's like, for one, I didn't grow up here. So for me to even be in this industry was not something I expected to be in. Like, if you had told 16-year-old me who lived in a different country and tried that you were going to be working on some of the biggest shows today, I'd be like, you're crazy. It's not going to happen. But, sure thing enough, it's like life finds a way. I think if you're passionate about something and it shows and you can talk about it and it almost becomes essentially your being and it's a very much a part of you. It's not something manufactured. It finds a way. Like something's got to give. You know what I mean? It's like an effort that you put in is going to resonate somewhere down the line. And it was because of comic books that kind of like drew me to that. As an example, kind of like in the same way that Patricia was telling the story, people would often visit my room when I was in high school, and they would be my visual effects test subjects. Like in my room in high school, we would do fireballs, disappearing acts. We would replicate visual effects from shows that I watched as a kid. We would do some Charmed stuff. We would do some Smallville stuff. And then, every now and then we would do things that are like from the XMen movies. But a lot of it during the time was very experimental for me. But it really wasn't until I came here that I realized it was possible. And I guess in a certain way, I just got lucky enough that when I did join the industry, I joined a studio that was young enough that I was able to get in on the ground floor. And now we've got exclusives on basically almost a good chunk of television's finest shows. Like, for instance, we just basically wrapped up the series finale of Gotham. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I'll say there's a good payoff. We also just finished Lucifer Season 4. We're in the middle of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5. You get the point. It's like, I think now I feel pretty lucky that I'm a part of that fabric, but also at the same time, it's very much a part of me.
So who were your guys' superheroes that you looked up to as a kid growing up? Who were your favorites?
For me, it's Spider-Man, man. Spider-Man, just because I could relate him being bullied by Flash Thompson and just could never get the girl, whether it was Betty Brant or Gwen Stacy. And when he got Gwen Stacy, she died.
Spoiler alert.
No, but the Spider-Man, I just remember grabbing that first comic book and then even it was through Secret Wars, knowing who he was, but then going deeper, reading the older stuff. I had my Marvel Masterworks hardcover and I read everything from Amazing Fantasy through all the 60s stuff. And you related to that. And you imagine that was you because he was a guy in a mask. So, I mean, that's the comment why a lot of reasons why a lot of people love Spider-Man and all the different incarnations, even Miles Morales and all that. It could be anyone.
I think for me, the X-Men probably resonated the best. He asked me this question earlier on, and the first answer I had was Superman by default, but then I really thought about it. It's like, which stories really resonated with me the most? And it was the X-Men part of it because I think it was an allegory or a metaphor to how I was feeling at the time, because when I was a kid, obviously, with a very conservative culture, you're in the closet, and the X-Men kind of like empowered you to be a lot more like a much more powerful version of yourself. So for me, it was basically the X-Men, because it's like, okay, they're outcasts, but at the same time, they've also got all these cool powers. So it's like, okay, well, I'm maybe not be the best part of society right now, but at the same time, it's like, I could idealize myself in so many ways.
And Mark, can you tell everybody where you grew up?
I grew up in the United Arab Emirates. It's somewhere in the Middle East. It's very much detached from Hollywood. In fact, it's like I went back over there this last summer and I asked people there, so do you watch this show? And they're like, oh, it's funny because so interestingly enough, and let me just explain like cultural aspects of the Middle East. In the Middle East, every community has pockets of community. So depending on which community you speak to, they will have different references to the things they know. So, our family, obviously being Filipino, I remember I was really humbled because I talked about, I did this project. I won blah, blah, blah. I won an Emmy and yada, yada, yada. And I had to explain to them what that was. They know what an Emmy was. They were like, okay, did you get prize money? I'm like, no, it's a trophy. No, I'm dead serious. It's like, they didn't know what it was. So I basically had to explain what it was. On another note, I told them, I worked on Gotham, and obviously the larger community being Filipino, they were like, is that on TFC?
The Filipino channel. That's TFC.
I was like, no, it's not on TFC. But it's a different world for sure. And it's in the Middle East.
And just going back, well, being in the Middle East and then making the move here to the U.S. I'll start with Mark. Like, how did you transition from like immigrating here and then getting into the visual effects world?
The interesting part about moving here, I feel like I wasn't completely forthright with my journey because after the United Arab Emirates, I did end up in Australia, and I think I developed a lot of my confidence when I moved to Australia because the community over there was very similar to here. And I don't know, I felt like it was, when you live in the Middle East, it was very culturally repressed, whereas in Australia, it was very multicultural like it is here. So when I moved to Australia, I kind of, I was in the last year of college, and I kind of got to know people there. I assimilated into the community, and when I moved here, it became more of a seamless transition, really. But in terms of like getting into the entertainment industry, that in itself was very different because I went to school for it, but at the same time, I didn't really know what to go to school for. As you know, visual effects in particular, or this industry is really very young, and the avenues to get into it are sometimes a question mark. There really is no exact avenue to get into this industry. That's the truth of it. For me, what ended up happening was I went to school for it. I got myself involved in a lot of things. And for some reason, I ended up at this small facility that was at the cusp of growth. And because of that, I'm here today. So I think the best way I really put it is there are a lot of talented people out there. I was just lucky that I got a break, is basically how I'm going to put it. It's like, I'm not going to say I'm the greatest person out there. Sure, there's a fucking statue in the living room, but really that's all it is. It's a statue.
And the Emmy is heavy, by the way.
Yeah.
We've held it.
Yeah, all it is a statue, but you take the breaks that life gives you and you run with it. Otherwise, what's the point?
And what about you, Patricia? Like your transition from being a student and then becoming a filmmaker, and then eventually, doing the debut, and then working on the debut, and then Black Eyed Peas music videos, and then feature.
Even though I graduated from USC Film School, I would say my real school came from working on the debut, which was the independent film, Filipino American, ended up being bought out by Columbia TriStar or Sony Pictures. But being on that set I got a taste of the independent film world, and I fell in love with it. Got to see how hard it was, how difficult it was. Met my wife there. It's almost weird. People always say you go to high school, you go to college, you kind of know for me, it was going to high school, USC, debut. The debut took such a big chunk of my life. And a lot of my experiences was due to that, and all the people I met, all my network, getting close to my Filipino American community all around the United States. Mm-hmm. I can tell you probably half of most of my contacts, my network, even all the phone numbers are from that tour, all my contacts. And so using that community kind of inspired me to focus my stories, my storytelling on stories about Filipino American. So everything, whether it's a music video from the Black Eyed Peas or any short story, I would always try to pick out things from our history that weren't well known. Right?
Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to piggyback on that, by the way. First of all, I want to thank Walter because you're actually the person that introduced me to the community. I spent most of my career not being a part of this community, not being a part of any community really, apart from just doing the work. And, while that was great and all, and I survived and I definitely thrived in it, mm-hmm. there was something that wasn't personal about it. Like, I think, as I was kind of mentioning, one of the things I'm doing right now is, whereas Patricio got into that aspect of the filmmaking business and the community in general much earlier on, I'm basically at the beginning stages of doing that. And it's an exciting time because, I think now it's probably best that I joined it at this point in time, because if I had joined it back then, I wouldn't really have been a voice at all, or I wouldn't have had built a credibility. Whereas today, I feel like I could speak with a lot better credibility to the work that I've already done outside of it. And I still continue on doing that. But at the same time, I'm also putting in some time to do projects that are very much geared towards telling stories from our culture. However, the one thing that I did affirm is that while I want to tell stories from our culture, the stories that I will tell are not your mom and pop stories. They're going to be the fantastical, the scary, the powerful. They're always going to be fantasy stories, sci-fi stories. That's where I thrive. Those are the stories that really resonate with me. So yes, I will be telling stories from our culture, but it'll be in a different framework.
But that's how you make it more universal.
Oh yeah,
right?
exactly.
I mean,
that's
the key.
really the whole point. Is because people always want to see new material, but they always like seeing material that's something that they could resonate to, and sci-fi fantasy resonates with a universal crowd.
I have a question about visual effects and how much it's changed over the years. Because Pat, you were talking about VHS out there. You're kind of dating yourself, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
And so, you know, from and we'll start with you, Pat. How was it for you at the very beginning doing visual effects? You know, back then, and how much has it changed until now?
I mean, you have to be resourceful. I think it taught me, like, I mean, you know, back then editing was very linear. You know, everything is non-linear. I mean, you know, for Lumpia 1 itself was shot on a video 8. You know, so that was even advanced with VHS tapes.
wait, what is a video?
It's like high 8. It was before high 8.
Wait,
You know,
This is before
8
a lot of
not even
people's
Super
times
8.
right now.
It's like, you know what I'm saying? So like this is the camcorder. I mean, nowadays everyone has access to video. I can tell you, even growing up in Daly City, if you're a Fil-Am, you know, Filipino American, a kid in high school, everyone wanted to be a DJ. I grew up where, you know, DJ Cuber, Mixmaster Mike, this is what Filipino Americans had to be. And that was like, so instead, the most popular kid in high school wasn't the football jock. It was a DJ, because they're the ones with access
There's
to all the
songs about
parties.
that. I'm with the DJ.
Yeah, garage
To be
parties.
fair, I don't know how relevant this is, but I first did my initial visual effects on a 350K tiny digital camera. Not even 1 megapixel, 350K pixels. Not
Hey, but that was still digital.
Oh yeah, it was still digital. Yeah,
That's still digital.
it's still digital.
I mean, we're going
Talk about
analog.
tapes.
We're speaking analog here, man.
It was
I don't know.
like 320 resolution, 320 by 240 was the resolution of what I was working with. It was like super tiny.
This is what's great, because, you know, I mean, a lot of it is the resources we have now, they're much easier. I think, but what's a constant is still trying to find your voice, navigating whether it's analog or digital. Trying to find storytellers, I'm even still learning, you know, still trying to develop what kind of stories to make it universal, using the resources and skills you have around you, and the team, building your team, you know. So a lot of it is, you know, what is it you're trying to say? And, you know, I'm not making a movie for myself. I mean, a lot of it was trying to improve on the craft.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why using the music videos, and even though we weren't getting paid with the Black Eyed Peas stuff, was really trying to develop what your audience was, who you're speaking to, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to find out your voice while you're trying to figure out who's going to watch it.
And you guys actually just brought up a good point, and I just want to ask you guys about how can you bring the Filipino American story, whether it's fantasy or realistic, to the mainstream audience, and what is your vision in doing that?
I think my opinion for that is you don't have it be specific. It's like just have the characters be characters, have a good story, have a presentation that matches that story. I think for me, I don't want it to be like, I'm never going to call it a Filipino American story. I'm never going to call it that. I'm just going to call it a story that's scary, a story that's fantasy, but it's never going to be ethnically specific. The only thing that makes it ethnically specific are the characters and maybe some of the origins of the story. But I would never, not for me, it's not something that I'm not going to do, only because, for one, I don't think I grew up like that. I grew up in a very multicultural society, and if you put characters that are coming from a specific background, by default, the representation of that character comes out in the story, and that's how you bring in audiences. You don't want to alienate them by being too ethnically specific, but then you bring them in because of the content that they're interested in. If they're interested in superhero stories or in monsters, or you know what I mean? It's like you want to have them interested based on the genres they're interested in, not because they're invested in the culture.
I think it's always a mixture of things. Yes, you know, you want to come up with a story that's universal. And I think it's why with Lumpia, we were trying to do a comic book movie, right? And now that the Filipino, like Lumpia, everyone knows lumpia. You think the trend is the Filipino food itself has become a trend that you're kind of using it as a marketing tool, right? And when I first started, especially with the Black Eyed Peas stuff, I think a lot of it was I felt more responsibility. I think after coming off the debut and making that and being a part of that movie and seeing the different pockets of different Filipino cultures even within the U.S., I kind of like created this niche where it's like, okay, when I did the Apple song, the first Black Eyed Peas videos, Do we know what the Black Eyed Peas are? I mean, they're still relevant, right? Okay, I just want to make sure. We're still relevant. Well, we did the Apple song. I tried to tie in an issue that was very important to the community at that time, right? Which was the veterans and and putting that in. Now, it's universal in the fact that it's Black Eyed Peas, but in a sense, I wanted to be a Filipino-American music video. It was very important for me to recruit people like Chad Hugo, DJ Retmatic, people who don't necessarily say they're Filipino, but that was my way of kind of winking that this is. So it was embracing the Filipino-American culture, but at the same time using the Black Eyed Peas platform as my universal thing. Now, when it comes to movies and stuff, you definitely, you have to find an audience, right? You can't just make your money alone on just the Filipino-American community alone. So the formula and the solution, what every filmmaker should, I guess, always try to tie in, how do you make it universal? Number one question is, how do you get funding for it, right? Because that will always tie into finding the audience. And for me, the debut was always that eye opener. It's like, man, we grossed $2 million over 2 years in theatrical thing alone, right? And that made money. And why couldn't we use those numbers? Why wasn't there an explosion of more movies like that came through the pipeline? And I can tell you from us as a team, the biggest thing is we didn't have a project ready. We were so involved in the self-distribution of that movie and touring around for 2 years and trying to get people to vote, almost like buy a ticket, you're voting for it. And in the industry, it's small beans, right? It doesn't register. It registered enough that Sony picked us up, but not to enough where it became headlines like Crazy Rich Asians and stuff. Right. I think it'd be different now if the debut came out today, though we argue whether it be as successful, even though you have now social media out there. I don't know. But I am definitely using Lumpia with a Vengeance as kind of like using somewhat the same model because, I lived that model.
And I definitely think Crazy Rich Asians and, these iconic movies has definitely helped open up doors for other diverse television shows, because growing up in, the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s, I mean, Asian people either were in Fast and the Furious, or like the DJ, or, it was always kind of like the sidekick character. And it's we don't have main characters out there, leads as Asian people or people of color in general,
I think to kind of sort of go on that, it's pretty interesting. I'm not going to lie. I ended up watching it. Charmed was pretty interesting in terms of the reboot because not only are the characters Hispanic, but also the things that they show on that show, like the spells, for instance, are also Hispanic. They're also Spanish. It's they actually now riff off the culture itself, not just have the characters be that. But that's as an example, that's what I'm saying. It's still Charmed, but at the same time, because the characters are now Hispanic, they're now drawing influences from Mexican culture and putting it into it. It's I was surprised when they started introducing certain spells that are from a different culture that were not a part of the original lore.
So it's using Santeria and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. They did do that. So
nice.
That to me was pretty interesting. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
So have you guys have had any issues trying to pitch Filipino-centric or Filipino-American-centric types of projects to investors, producers? Any issues with that?
With Lumpia with a Vengeance, that was the story for the entire thing, why it took so long. It didn't matter if we had the crowdfunding, the Kickstarter was... the only reason why we put up the crowdfunder for this film was because not only were we celebrating the 10th year anniversary of the first film, but after how long already since the debut release, I wanted to see if there was still an audience for these kind of films, that someone would go out there. And so I would have done Lumpia if we didn't get that crowdfunded, especially the last second. It went viral. And I was just very shocked. I was very shocked, I guess, that it was a blessing to me to see that not only were people still out there that wanted to see some, and I don't think people really cared so much about the story so much as they were hungry for a movie about the Filipino American community.
And y'all got Danny Trejo, who is very kind.
And Danny Trejo wouldn't allowed to.
How did that happen? Actually,
he read the script, and the scene was really written for him.
Okay.
It's weird because you think in this industry people will just no, this is beneath me. And believe me, there are people in the community that said that. And that's why whether it's investors or recruiting people for the project, you get the same reaction. So to have someone like Danny come in and really say yes and be part of it, that was a boost, and even boosted our entire project to the point where we finished.
I mean, even getting Mark Munoz, who is a MMA fighter, to be in your film.
I would say that we wouldn't got Dan Cherry if we wouldn't got Mark Munoz a year prior. And I think getting Mark Munoz involved in it, and even reading his story, it made sense for him to play Kuya, in the film.
So did you guys write it for him, or did it kind of come organically?
No, I think the movie, when we first kickstarted, was supposed to be just a sequel to the original, just getting the original cast. But the movie, I don't think would have been the Universal of appealing. And so we thought big. You think big first, right? Our budget didn't allow us to think big, but why not? Ask people. Mark Munoz, I met him once at all these Filipino festivals and at screenings and stuff, and asked management, and they said yes. And that was. It seemed like the movie itself, even though it's been a 6-year journey, 5-6-year journey now. There's always been kind of checkpoints that even when we were at the point of giving up, they would move us on. So Mark Munoz was definitely one of those checkpoints. And then we started shooting, and then Danny Trejo, another checkpoint that got us in, and we ran out of money again. So and then we finally wrapped last November, which was a big deal. After we never thought
it was such a journey.
It was a relief.
Speaking of meeting people, did you guys ever meet Stan Lee? I know you guys have been doing Comic-Con.
You know what's sad? It's like, okay, I've had Comic-Con passes for like the last few years now, obviously.
And you didn't use them.
I didn't use it.
Oh my gosh, shame on you.
Dude,
You
literally have my number, Mark. What the
I didn't use it until
hell?
last year.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Yo.
This is why he joined a tribe, you guys. This is why it's important to be a part of a community.
I've
You
had.
have my phone number. You're gonna be like, hey.
Well, I didn't know you. I didn't know you were coming on, but
You had the golden ticket, and you did
no,
not.
I've always
Oh my
had it in extra
gosh.
passes too, and I just never
So-
went
Wow.
until last year. I did. I finally
Okay,
did.
last year. But Pat, did you meet Stan Lee?
Yeah, I mean, one of my cherished things is all my comic books CGC by him, signed by. I mean,
Yeah.
but I could never take a picture of them. Like, I didn't want to pay for it. The guy always bought it.
Why are you gonna be that
See,
guy?
I got a picture with Stan Lee, and I didn't pay. Nope, because I met him when I was like 8 years old, and then it was before people started charging for signatures and autographs, and I got him to sign a bunch of comics at the time. I was like, yeah.
I don't know. The first photo that I ever asked for that I paid for was one of the Power Rangers, and I'm just gonna admit it flat out.
Hey, they were pretty awesome.
No,
Gotta
I mean,
say.
it's like, all right. So this is no lie. Emmy's parties, I don't care. It's like, you meet celebrities, blah blah blah. They're pretty, they're cool, whatever. But I totally geeked out when it was one of the Power Rangers. It's like I
Which
probably
one?
Which
the
one?
Blue Ranger.
Oh, Billy,
Wait,
that guy,
Billy, the original one?
the one with the glasses, right?
He had a mean back handspring.
No, I
Seriously.
mean like. I'm dead serious. I didn't geek out on anybody like at the parties, but I geeked out over
Billy
the
was a
Power
smart
Rangers.
one, you know? I dig Billy. Good choice. It's true.
I would have wanted to meet Jason though.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I wanted to change my name to Jason.
It's weird. The person I geeked out was Will Spartaccio. It was like not even. And I was like that for me as a kid. Being he was one of the few Filipino comic book artists growing up. So him, I geeked out. I don't get starstruck so much, but like him, I remember first meeting him, I couldn't stop talking.
Oh wow.
And Wills is the one who created Bishop from X-Men. I mean, he's incredible.
He's reuniting with Rob Liefeld on
And he
Project
was
Now.
also Wills was also our panelist last year at
That's right.
Long Beach Comic Con or Comic Expo. Sorry. And so let's get back in track. We're going on a tangent.
That's pretty easy though. That's pretty easy.
Coming up projects. What are you guys working on, and why did you decide to go with this project?
So, are we talking about current studio project, or are we talking about
Let's do
personal
both.
projects?
Whatever you would
All
like
right.
to say.
So, current projects wise at the studio, obviously we're still waiting on a new season of Westworld. We just wrapped up Gotham. We just finished up Lucifer. We're in the middle of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's one of those things where I get really tired of enumerating them. I just want to tell people to go and look at IMDb. But separately, though, as I was kind of talking about earlier, this is the first year really that I tried to engage more of like a Filipino type material. And the first thing that we ended up doing was this project that got pitched to me at first by these girls from the community, one of them being Erica, who's friends with Arlene. And, I told them it's like, at first I wasn't really sure what kind of stories I wanted to tell. And they first pitched me, I'm sorry to say, but a charmed ripoff. And I basically said, no, we're not going to do that. And then after that, we started looking into some of their personal stories. And one of their stories became so interesting to me that I told her, okay, well, we'll take your personal story, but then let's infuse it with something supernatural. Because in my opinion, one way you can make the supernatural more personal is by infusing it with an actual story. That's true. And so that's what we're doing. It's a story about a woman named Carmina, and it's got a visual framework that's very distinctly Filipino-American, but at the same time, as opposed to just, your usual sob story, she gets out of it through supernatural means because she's, how we always play around, especially in our culture, there's always like a mix aspect of things where somebody's like a mix of something else. And I think the idea that we were going with is, what if she's a mix of something else, not racially, but supernaturally?
Mystically.
What did you say? I didn't even
I said mystically.
All my chips right now are on Olympia 2, but if I'm lucky enough to do another film, I do have a biopic. I'm trying to take a breath from all the geeky projects that I've been involved in. And there's a biopic of I have the rights to someone's life that I'm trying to adapt that screenplay. I haven't really revealed much about this project, but it got into a contest and it kind of went to... It was a finalist for something, and it's motivated my writing team to move on to this project. We were hoping that this project is something we can announce when the film is completed.
Nice. DJ Cubert.
That'd be nice. Oh, actually, one of my other projects, it's always been a mobile DJ film that I've been wanting to do, but this is something separate. It was...
Sorry, for people who don't know, mobile DJ was this thing back in Northern California, and I think, New York, but Northern California thing where these guys, DJ turntablists, would travel to do parties, house parties, garages, high schools, like in the 90s. It's a big thing. They made lots of money. Would actually be a good movie, now come to think of it. Going back, and you guys mentioned earlier about, Mark mentioned about like creating characters but not being specifically Filipino and whatnot.
Well, no. What I'm saying is they are Filipino. That's just a part of their character. It's just not the title or the presentation itself has nothing to do with them being Filipino except for the fact that the character is Filipino.
Yes.
That's what I meant.
And so when you guys develop characters, whether it's with Lumpia or short films or your personal projects, and like how do you guys decide the difference between a Filipino and a Filipino American as a character, or even a person of color, or when you decide to create a woman character, even because these are underrepresented characters in the film and comic book industry, really.
Your creative process in deciding.
Lumpia with a Vengeance, all characters are all either Filipino American. Maybe have the Filipino British. We play on the aspect of just the fact of what is Filipino being, because everyone has being Filipino itself. There's different dialects, we're just diverse itself in our culture. So, but coming up with a process, that was something that was kind of. It was difficult because in a way that I think I put too much baggage usually when I do write about my community because there's a lot more pressure. You think you want to represent them well, but at the same time you want to service the story. And the thing is, it's the same process I will take is that we're just like any other human beings, you can't treat them. All characters can be all positive. I think there's always this whole thing, this fear of like creating a Filipino American character that's just evil and everyone's gonna don't represent us like that way. That's not how we are. That it's kind of so for me with Lumpia, since everyone's Filipino, you can have the villain, bad guy, good guy. It doesn't matter. If people fall in love.
I think for me, I'm a little less apologetic about it. It's for one, I didn't grow up with a large Filipino community, so I don't aim to please, is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. The characters are Filipino because that's who they are ethnically, and sometimes being Filipino doesn't always mean you're connected to the culture. Mm-hmm. Because for me, my first few years here, I actually was not a part of any Filipino community. So I feel like you are Filipino based on your heritage, that's one of the first things that makes you who you are, and some of the memories and some of the stories, like your recollections as a person, as a character, are what make you Filipino. Just because you're not a part of a larger Filipino culture doesn't mean you're not one. Does that make sense? It's like, I think sometimes when we're a part of a larger community, it almost becomes a responsibility to try to service that. Whereas for me, I never was one, so I don't find that a responsibility. I will put the characters that are intriguing or that that interest me in terms of like telling a story, and I just want to make sure that for one, it services the story. But if it doesn't, I'm not going to force that character to be that ethnic group. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not shy about that.
And I think that makes so much sense for people who have lived in different countries or have been around in like different parts of the United States where there are not a lot of diversity or Filipinos in general. And because I was born in Germany, and then and then I lived in Washington State. That was the bulk of my childhood.
I need to hear your German.
And then it's with the Filipino accent. I learned German with the Filipino accent. It's weird. But yeah, you know, like being kind of like the one and only representing, you know, people would be like, "Oh, you need to go back to your country." I'm like, Germany?
See, that's what I'm saying.
It's a very different take on things. Where, you know, Patricio and Walter, they both grew up in the Bay Area, where there's a huge population. So that pressure for you guys is probably really real. Versus like me and Mark, like we only have the pressure of our parents who like trolled us, you know, growing up.
No, I mean, as an example, I'm just going to say this. Here's an example. If there was ever a story that tells me there's a character that's a vampire in Germany, but she happened to be Filipino, and I'm literally just like going off Arlene's story right here. That to me is already pretty interesting, because she doesn't need to explain the fact that she's Filipino, but she's a vampire character that's living in Germany, but it just happens to be that she's also from a Filipino descent. But not every fabric of her has to show that culture. It's just who she is. And you don't need to explain that. You don't need to over-explain that. And I think for me, that's what makes a much more powerful character.
And it has to serve as a story, you know what I mean? So, I mean, in Olympia, basically, it's the story itself is
in
about...
the community.
Yeah, it's about a community. Fogtown is an extreme version of Daly City, where the mayor just happens to be Filipino, and so everyone's Filipino. And so we played on the comedy of the fact that, oh my God, it's like the Manila of America right here, you know? And if you go to Daly City, you could feel like that.
I thought it was San Diego for some reason.
Could be the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, with that, let's just open it up. Are you guys okay accepting questions from the audience? And
yeah, absolutely.
If you got anyone in the audience have any questions to our filmmakers? Yes.
Oh, hold on one second. I'm going to give you the mic. Hold on one second.
My name is Amelia, and thank you so much for being here. I just first want to say, like, just for putting this together, how healing it is to just walk into a room and like everyone freaking looks like my family. So thank you for being you and for sharing a little bit of all your stories. I wanted to ask, like, as a creative person myself, like, how do you stay on task? Like, how do you, because I can imagine there's just like ideas. So how do you actually like zero in, choose something and be like, okay, this is the thing, I'm going to build a team and this is what we're going to do?
You just have to make a conscious decision. The reason I say that is because if you don't make that conscious decision, you could keep on changing your mind and have, you know, when you make a project, you will have multiple influences of people telling you, hey, the story could be better with this. Hey, you could do this instead. You could do that. But the thing is, it's like, if you want to stay true to your vision, you just have to commit to it. Whether it's going to be great or awful at the end, commit to it, finish it, and then the next one could be better, is what I'm going to say.
Oh, I agree. I mean, if it's an idea that you still love after, tomorrow or next week, for me, it was after, 6-7 years now, I've been on the same story, you know, and you still feel as passionate as it was in day one, it's worth it. Build your team around that. Find people who are like-minded, who share the same vision, and who support you as a filmmaker, you know? I mean, you don't want too many butting heads. You just definitely want people who will help you, assist you, realizing your vision, you know, and you want to hear them out, but in the end, you're in charge of that, you know? You're the one who's going to make that a reality.
Yeah, because it's so easy to kind of like go from one idea to the other. And I think the last person you want to be is, you don't want to be that person that starts a project and doesn't finish it. you actually
Oh,
want to
believe me,
start.
I know.
And finish it. Because here's the thing: this industry, as big as it seems, it's pretty small. Your reputation follows you, and there are people. I'm like, I don't want to work with you. You know what I mean?
Like
It's
if they don't finish.
yeah, you don't want that to be your reputation. You want to be somebody that's known to finish something, and if it's not the best version of your story, still finish it and then do another one.
Yeah. Thank you. I also wanted to know is Carmina, that story you're talking about, is that a movie?
It's a
How do
short.
we follow that? Like, when
It's on Facebook. It's on
it is?
Instagram. It's on everything else. Just follow me. You'll find it.
Okay.
It's super easy. But yeah,
Thank you so much.
no worries.
Thank you. Oh, behind you.
Hey guys, thanks for being here. I hope I didn't miss it, but when you're creating characters, do you create it with like you already know the type of person or like your friend that's going to play it, or just what is your creative process for when you create characters?
Okay, so it depends. It depends. I think it varies depending on what you're trying to do. Sometimes you start off with a character that's a base idea, but they're still pretty blank. And, even after the casting process, organic things do tend to happen where you might think you know a character, but then you find an actor that infuses a certain personality into your character, and that could change a lot. What remains true to the core is probably your story, but the personalities of your character could potentially change depending on how you've progressed in your creative development. Like, it depends. Like, is it a material that's sourced? Then you're obviously locked. But if it's a material that, you're creating from scratch, then there's a lot more leeway to start changing it and refining it as you go along because it's open, Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
And we got time for one more question for anyone. Upcoming project. All right, you guys have no wrap it up. Well, I just want to say thank you guys for coming here. Please give a round of applause for Patricio Ginelsa, the filmmaker, director of Lumpia. Mark AJ Nazal, Emmy-winning visual effects artist working on Westworld, and tons of other shows that I just visit his IMDb page because it's an impressive list. So if you guys want to catch, Mark actually appeared on our FilAm Creative Voices podcast during the first season. So look him up. We're FilAm Creative Voices. Looks up on YouTube, Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes. And so just follow our social media also, FilAm Creative, and then also FilAm Creative Voices. Check us out. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the expo. I'm Walter Talents.
And I'm Arlene De La Pena.
And you guys came to watch FilAm Creative's Voices. Thank you.
Thank you.